Hi there, everyone. Welcome to our inaugural podcast entitled Building Dentistry. Everyone's probably thinking, why do we need another podcast? There's a huge amount of podcasts in the market at the moment pertaining to the business of dentistry, but nothing really focused on the supply chain market. So we thought, why don't we put together a supply chain orientated podcast for those that are interested in those involved in supplying, equipping, solutions for the dental market, all in one place. Over the course of the podcast, we'll be talking to a number of individuals and companies who are heavily involved in the supply chain market with a focus on SWOT practices. So entitled Building Dentistry, my partner here today, partner in crime, is Chris Devillier from Eclipse Dental. He is what is your official title, Chris?
Well, I would say it's probably project sales manager. I look after the SWOT practice projects, the sort of medium to large equipment sales, digital specialist, that's pretty much it. So anything that comes my way is sort of under my remit. The setup is, I think, quite good because we all share a lot of knowledge within the company, but we sort of lean on each other for specialism. So I would say, project sales manager, look after the projects, but with a specialism in digital.
Excellent, fantastic. So, I mean, the whole remit behind the podcast is to bring together the supply chain that facilitate this multi-million-pound industry. With a focus on, especially since COVID, SWOT practice development. But what we're going to be doing is talking to people like Chris, who facilitate the market, and talking about what they can offer in terms of solutions, and also get into the nitty gritty about the individuals in the business as well. I always have said to essentially a lot of the staff that have worked with me over the years is that people like you, they listen to you, and if they trust you, they'll buy from you. But with the market getting ever complex, understanding the value of the supply chain and understanding what they can bring to the market is very difficult to do at some of the trade shows and events that are out there. So we thought, why not bring it online in a relaxed manner? We can talk to all these companies that are involved and really get into the nitty gritty about the individuals and the products that they can offer. Chris and I have been working together for a while now in terms of SWOT practice development. Obviously, as a company, we're heavily involved in obviously design and build, and Chris obviously on the equipment side, but obviously they've got a huge amount of experience in the building side as well. But what we wanted to do is talk about the process of setting up a practice, what key timeline is involved in setting up those practices, and how we kind of fill in those gaps in terms of getting you to ground zero day when you open up the practice. So hopefully the next 45 minutes is just really talking about the process, which will set a precedence for the rest of the series on, what's involved in setting up a new practice or refurbishing a practice. So essentially, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty a bit here, Chris, before we get onto that. Is obviously you've been in dentistry a while. How did you get into dentistry? What's your background?
Dentistry for me was another branch of sales. So I've always been in sales for pretty much my whole life, and then I went off on a bit of a tangent and did sales training, and it was then sort of that sales training and sort of doing seminars and going to a few conventions that led me into sales training and marketing. And basically, I met a supplier at a conference, and after having run my own business for a little while, which was fundamentally doing marketing for dentists. I connected with a supplier, and I decided to step away from running my own business and started learning a little bit more about the products that the products that the dentists were actually buying to carry out the services that they were offering. So I started from a marketing background, I would say, but moved in quite quickly, and yeah, I think I've spoken to a few people in dentistry, and it's one of those things. Is once you get into it, it is you get so much knowledge around such a niche sector that it is quite difficult to hang up your gloves, if you like. You're not going to yeah. The more knowledge you gain in dental, the more I think the better you can do your job, but the more unique you are, and the sort of the more reliable you can be, and so that's really my goal from sort of here on out, is just to keep meeting more people, keep speaking to more dentists, keep liaising with suppliers, and then really sort of just building on that knowledge base.
Cool, 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 cool. Just to kind of give you a bit of background on my end, I mean, I'm slightly a different tangent, but got into sales probably inadvertently, like Chris. I was originally a technician. I qualified as a technician at Guy's and did my further degrees in dental technology. But whilst I was doing my masters, I started working for a very well-known Dentsply Sirona dealer. And it really just kind of went from there, 10 years with them, and then last 20 years until now was actually running my own business, and supplying solutions like Eclipse. And then very recently decided to have a bit of a change, and now end up in the building industry, the healthcare building industry. So we specialize in design and build predominantly of dental practices, but a huge amount in the healthcare industry, which is where we've both Eclipse and Excel have kind of come together and working together a number of projects throughout the UK. So very focused on dentistry, especially on squat practices, which is the key kind of topic for us today. And said we'll hopefully set a precedence for all the podcasts that we're developing over the series. But as Chris, you probably will probably agree, is especially since COVID, there's been a huge rise in squat practice development. I think probably the NHS or the dental practices or dentists have realised since COVID, there's been more move or transition into private dentistry. Not to say that we don't do NHS squat practices, but there's a huge amount of work now happening in the squat practice market, and people putting on their own, their own kind of personality to squat practices. So there's been abundance of design and build projects ongoing for us over the last 4 or 5 years. So, obviously key companies like us come together, and we'll
Yeah.
introduce a lot of the other companies kind of moving forward. But, when a dentist is
Well,
looking for
mm.
a practice, what do you think are kind of the first steps that they need to be considering when looking for a site and then developing the site and finding the right partner?
Yeah. Well, sorry, just to touch on what you said before about the sort of the growth and the expansion after COVID. I think that's a massively key element that hasn't really been explained and doesn't seem to be stopping. I was having a chat yesterday with a manufacturer, and they have said that they think, and they're very reputable. Belmont have stated that they think. Sorry, Eugene from Belmont has said that he thinks that the squat practice is going to double over the next 5 years. So from the growth and from the research that we've been doing, I think the way that dentists are now becoming, we're sort of almost moving away from these from the sort of the 6, 7, 8, 9 surgery NHS practices, which was just about quantity and getting people through the door and then out as quickly as possible. It's now much more about a service and providing providing that service for their patients, and it's very, very difficult to do that in a single building with 8 or 9 surgeries.
It's very much
So
drill and fill, isn't it, as I would call it? It's
yeah,
just getting the numbers through and facilitating those that need to see a dentist and getting them out the door. And as you say,
exactly.
people are really looking to put a stamp on their own kind of technique and profession, and trying to find a bit more time to
Yeah.
service those customers with better products, better solutions, etc. So yeah,
Well,
you're right. I think it's moving
it,
away from the large practices to very far more specialist solutions.
yeah.
Throughout the UK.
Well, I think it's like anything. It's so the number of squat practices, and again, there's so many different people and so many different reasons to open it up. You might already have a practice in a certain area with a population of about 20,000 people, or you might be relocating but don't really want to sell your existing practice, so you maintain that, but you relocate and you move to the West Country or some area in the UK. um, it's easier to replicate a small business across multiple sites than it is to run one giant site. So if because you get fundamentally you get more control. So that's where we're seeing now I think an increase in what we call like almost a mini corporate. So while you've got the big boys of the industry, Portman, Bupa, where they've got hundreds of practices, and it's a much larger animal to tame. Now we're seeing that there are a lot of entrepreneurial type dentists that have maybe set up a successful practice, and then they've said, actually, do you know what, we can do this again. I know another, they within the industry, they know somewhere else, they look for a location, they find that location, and they can almost replicate that initial success again by by having a formula to it. So I think when people are starting up a squat practice, the first question I really ask is what's your drive, what's the reason behind it. And when you find that out, when whether it's I want to move away from being an associate, I want to have more control, I want to be put a stamp on the world, I want to leave my mark. Then it becomes a lot easier to guide that person and almost give them a helping hand towards achieving that goal, but knowing their drive and their reason behind it.
Yeah, it's a bit. It is very much about individuality, and a lot of dentists are now specialising as well. Not just implantology and endo, etc., etc. So it's finding putting together a solution that they can actually then really specialise and really develop their core knowledge.
Yeah,
But as you say, they've got to be able to put a stamp on it somehow, and this is why I think is a major driving factor for the practice development at the moment. And as I said, we've got so many projects on the go, and as of yourself and many other competitors, and it's a really exciting time for dentistry,
it
especially with
really
change.
is. I mean, the exciting part about it from my side is obviously we get involved quite early on. So I can't remember if you mentioned before. So I work for a company called Eclipse Dental. We supply dental chairs. We do pretty much all the equipment from start to finish. But I get quite heavily involved in the design process and the sort of the consultative part at the beginning. So when someone's first looking at opening up a squat practice, they might reach out to a dental supplier like ourselves to really sort of test the water, find out what we've done before, what it might look like, and that is the reality. No two dental practices, when they're being opened up as squat practices, and again, I'm not talking about the Boopers or the Portmans of the world, but no two dental practices are identical. They are all unique in their own way. The buildings are slightly different. The location's different. You have to cater to a certain demographic. So it is, for me, it's really exciting to see that people are actually caring about, this is no longer the blanket umbrella of the NHS where everything looks the same, feels the same, and you get the same service. This is now professionals, dental professionals, that care about their jobs deeply, and they care about their patients deeply, and they want to provide that environment for the patient to actually feel at home and give them the best possible service. And yet, that does come at a premium. So you go to a private practice, and that that's going to cost a little bit more. But it's like anything in this world. If you actually feel that you're being looked after, and you feel that you've been given that extra care, um, I don't think people mind paying for that. So it's it's something which I fully endorse and get very excited when we have a new practice that comes on board.
I mean, we obviously, yeah, as you say, it's there's a huge amount of dentists now looking for sites and looking for setting up independent, especially the younger practitioners who are kind of, not wanting to go into NHS dentistry immediately in practice as an associate, or they're just the young associates now looking for their sites. So we, obviously we get a lot of inquiries, like you say, from an equipment perspective or from a design and build perspective, getting involved, or even, via an architect or architectural services that we also offer. Obviously, trying to find a site is a key issue, and I know we've worked together and lectured on this in terms of the process of finding a site and what to look for, in terms of the high street, in terms of commercial buildings, in terms of healthcare buildings that are already out there. I mean, obviously, there's a huge amount to choose from. They come with their pros and cons, as we know. The high street
Yeah.
is really accessible, but the rents and rates are quite expensive. Commercial buildings or office complexes, I prefer personally, because obviously there's a huge amount of parking and accessibility. You can set up multidisciplinary sites, and they're simpler to build, to be fair, because obviously they're just open spaces. So they have their pros and cons. But the question also is a question of demographics and where you should be looking for these sites. Competition's good, as we know. It's good. It's not a bad idea to have other dentists within the vicinity.
No, and to sort of borrow on that as well, it's very well. Again, these massive sort of 8-9 surgery practices may well have different speciality dentists within that same practice. But as we said before, these are now sort of 2-3 surgery squat practices that are popping up. So to have multi-specialism dentists, dental practices is quite rare. So you might have an endodontist at one end of the street, and you might have one of the best implantologists a little bit further down. And I think they're almost complementing each other now, rather than being in this hot competition. So I think when you do look at a location, having other dental practices in the area isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just find out what their main focus is, and then see if that complements what you're doing. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there's an opportunity for cross referral, isn't there? If you build up a healthy relationship with them, and also other complementary, kind of healthcare solutions as well. We know practices that have spare rooms and put, chiropody chiropractors in, or whatever it may be. But you can have that
yeah,
relationship with a high street other healthcare solution provider as well. But obviously, it's finding the site is the key issue. It's where do you look, where do you start, what
yeah,
to look out for. It is a bit of a minefield. I understand. Dentists come to us and going, what do I do, or where do I go? But there are key areas that they should. I mean, obviously, everyone does the online searches, the Zooplas and the Rightmoves of the world, but there are some dedicated healthcare kind of websites where you can actually find specific healthcare sites and then actually have a wider span, because they're more
yeah,
commercially orientated. And also, it's very much dependent on how much square meterage, square footage that they should be looking for. Everyone's looking to set up
exactly.
I tend to find that there's lots of grandiose ideas and grandiose plans. We're going to set up a 5-6 surgery practice. As a first build, I actually would probably walk away from a project like that, because, as we know, it's very difficult to fill 6 surgeries in one go. You've got to start
Yeah,
off cost effectively, small, develop your personality and your brand, and get some business through the door before you consider 6 surgeries. I have in the past been on a site where they're looking to build 6 surgeries as a squat practice, and I've walked away and said, look, this is just not going to work. So
yeah.
there has to be value in it. 3 surgeries.
It's yeah. I three yeah I think that's it's a key point as well. So when someone does knock at the door and say, this is what I want, this is the plans I have, and I heard an anecdote again yesterday, just something so similar to what you just said, which is, when you go in. So why are people now not buying up the dental practices that are already existing? So why wouldn't you necessarily go into an existing dental practice, buy it, and then transform it? And that's you're buying inherited issues. You're buying, a history that you have nothing to do with, and I think that is one of the key factors. Like, also, you don't necessarily know that your style of dentistry is going to work exactly the same as the previous style of dentistry. It might
But
have been an
it is an
absolutely
option, though,
unique
isn't it, Chris? Though,
case.
to be
Yeah,
fair, but
absolutely option.
but the
Yeah,
big problem is goodwill. You're paying for it, and potentially, and there's always a big argument about the cost and value of goodwill,
yeah,
and it generally is overvalued, and that's why a lot of
yeah,
people don't. And you're right. Going back to what you're saying, people can. It takes a lot longer to then put your own mark and brand on an existing practice. As you say, you're investing in an unknown. You don't really know what it's like buying a house. You don't know really
yeah.
what the next door neighbours are like.
It's
So
almost like buying a house and then having the previous owner as a lodger. And that means that, they're going to start. I've done quite a few refurbishments where that's exactly the case. So you buy the property, or you buy the business from the existing principal dentist, and the principal dentist then stays on for a year as an associate.
yeah,
So your changes and your modifications are being watched by this principal dentist, who I'm sure was extremely proud of what they'd created. So on that, you're now. These are the types of hurdles to overcome. I'm not saying it's going to happen in every single place, but more than likely, it almost feels like an unnecessary confrontation that you're going to be having when you are the entitled business owner. And I think when you start and you open up a squat practice, you want to put your own stamp on it. You don't necessarily want to have to um, make accommodations for what was done before. You can
sure.
create what you want.
Yeah,
And yeah, so yeah, on the when you look at sort of different places to go in, and different sort of buildings, different sites, there are so many different ones to choose from. My immediate thought would be, yeah, Zoopla, Rightmove. Go and check out to see what properties there are. Um, Residential properties, as long as you've got a little bit of savvy about you to apply for planning permission, or then lean on either Excel or even Eclipse to sort of walk you through that process. Everything can then be possible. So it really does give you, when you start looking at residential, it gives you a whole world of opportunities. So a lot of the time, those rooms are exactly the right size for a dental surgery. There's very little modification to be done to internal structures. There might be a couple of knockouts and things like that, that you can afford to do, but you're not looking at doing things like a brand new, hot water system in the building. You might need to change the electrics, you might need to boost it up, but you're not redoing an entire new system of electrics. So all of these types of things can be considered when you're looking at what you're budgeting for, and all of this. So I think even before you start choosing a property, it's almost, what's your budget? What do you want to spend? And we both know that you can spend 110,000 to set up a single surgery squat practice, or you could potentially spend, yeah, done one about £3.5 million. So it really does have such a vast range.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think it's well, it's finding the flavour that suits you best in terms of location. Office spaces, as I said, we know are simpler and a bit more cost effective to build. They traditionally have more light and generally more amenities, actually, that we see.
Yeah.
But obviously, you share the maintenance expenses, and rates are typically, lower compared to the high street. But parking's fantastic. Retail spaces, as we know, visibility is fantastic.
Yeah.
Signage compared to other commercial properties, and then you've got synergies, as we talked about, in the high street with other businesses, etc., like a lot of restaurants and other healthcare providers. Parking,
Yeah.
well, could be hit and miss in the high street, but generally, big parking spaces around, easy to access for public transport. Medical sites is one that a lot of people don't really look at, probably because there's not many about,
No.
but dedicated medical site that do have space nowadays. You've got that atmosphere that creates, strong referral partners, and obviously the amenities are pretty good in terms of shared utility services and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. Ongoing
Yeah.
costs, particularly for medical sites, can be a little bit more expensive because they are purpose built, but they're generally cheaper to build, like the commercial sites. And again, parking's fantastic.
Yeah.
Resi's the big one. Is the big debate. I mean, and I know we do a lot of residential conversions. Costs are typically a little bit higher, can be, because there are multiple floors involved, etc. But the big advantage is ownership, isn't it? You can buy the property, whether it's leasehold or freehold, and
Yeah.
that retains within the business. And there's character. I think a lot of people don't look at it. There's a huge amount of character in residential buildings as well. Um, so that's kind of like the kind of four key areas in terms of properties that need to be considered. And obviously, we
Yeah.
talked about Zoopla, talked about Rightmove. There's two sites I always recommend to everyone that are looking for sites. One is called Property Link, and the other one is LoopNet. Really good search engines to find property in a wider scope, as well as healthcare sites, which is definitely worth keeping a note of to find properties. I always look at them, and if people are asking for sites throughout the UK, those are the two kind of areas or two websites I go to straight away. And there's thousands out there, thousands of sites to look at moving forward. But if we then look at the physical practice, we find the site, we're really keen on a site that we found. What would be the next process? Now, typically, as Chris says, we'd probably be both contacted at some stage by a dentist, looking at from an equipment perspective and looking at from a design and build perspective. But the first process really is to get it designed up.
Yeah.
You found a site, you need someone to go in, architect or an architectural designer, as we employ, go in and measure the whole place up, because you're going to need this for what they call building control compliance. So building control is basically the regulatory body or bodies that look at how the build is being done, and it's been done correctly and to regulation. So we've got to go in, measure it up, design it up. We sit down, and both parties will come together here about surgery design and building design and workflow, fire and safety, lighting, plumbing, electrics. All that stuff is done as part of the initial design and what they call the M&E process, the mechanical electrical process, which is what I call the builder's shopping list. And that will then give you a definitive price on what the build will cost. And then at the same time, Chris and the team will be looking at, the surgery design and the equipment that's involved. So we work in tag team. But this is where it really starts getting interesting, because all the other companies involved in the process of getting your practice, like equipment finance, building, obviously finance, the CQC compliance perspective, insurance perspective, all of those companies now start coming into play. So we need to, and again, I think companies like us will take a lot of that headache away and manage that for you and introduce the right people to help that process along. It's quite a daunting process for sure. They say like buying a car and buying a property is probably one of the most daunting tasks. Setting up a practice, I think, is huge. But I think finding a value partner to help you develop that is a key issue here, because of the complexity that's involved, in setting up these practices. And compliance is so big. Again, we work to HTM compliance, but also the building compliance perspective to make sure that when you open up on D-Day, that you're fully compliant and CQC is a breeze. But supply chain specifically in terms of equipment, Chris, how do you guys kind of get involved? What do you do with the client, potential client, when you're looking at surgery design and specifying equipment and that design process and choosing the right equipment? What's the kind of process at your end when you start chatting about that?
Well, so I mean, yeah, I mean, the initial conversation, like you said before, it can either happen that they'll either call us or they'll call you. Like that. That's really the first step. And I think when they call us, we then reach out. We say, let's jump on a Teams. And do you know what? I'm going to ask Excel to join this Teams call because I think it is really important that we almost both get involved right from the beginning. And so that, yeah, for me, that initial Teams call, that discovery call, where we learn about the vision, the goal, what the specialism of the practice is, if there's a site already. So usually we get contacted once there's already a site, when a property's been found and they're on the final stages of either agreeing a lease or exchanging contracts for the purchase. At that point, obviously, we know that it's we can put some time behind it, because obviously that's now it's going to be moving forward pretty quickly once those lease contract has been signed. Obviously, the worst thing is, I say the worst thing is when you've got a property and it's not filled. You are paying for that property, or you're using up that grace period at the beginning that you don't want to. So I would say contacting us sooner rather than later is obviously better.
Yeah,
So realistically, finding out what equipment that is required. So this is something that without the so let's say you don't have a building, but you want to start finding out what costs are, and potentially what the impact is going to be. We can create a bit of a spec list for you. Just, it would be a generic spec list to start with, so it would just be chair package, cabinetry, what the standard cost would be. And then that will give you a bit of a range, or it will give you a range of pricing. Um, I think that's really important to know, to when you're going into setting up a practice. It's knowing that it's not a cheap venture. It's not something which is a lot. Again, I'll ask you the same question, but I think it's something that gets massively underestimated. From the very beginning, everyone thinks that, how much does it cost to build a house? If the house is already built, then it's got what, 50, 60,000 to do a project. And it is so far off, it can often blow any idea out the water. So I think understanding what potential costs can be, and then depending on that level of finish, and we're not talking quality, whether it's going to be falling apart, but we're talking about whether you're going to have Venetian plaster walls. So it will change
or micro cement.
your outgoing.
Micro
Yeah.
cement floor. I mean, that's
Oh yeah,
four
that's true.
times the
Yeah.
cost of vinyl. But and I
Yeah.
think 100%. You're talking about cost, and obviously, hopefully, this series will kind of explain this. A lot of people go in really uneducated because there's not really a huge amount of conversation being had
Yeah.
at the initial stages. It's like, as soon as we get a price to them, they're like, oh my God, that's much more expensive than I anticipated, or it's too expensive. And what are you comparing it against? I think hopefully,
Yeah.
again, this series will kind of explain the kind of costings involved in terms of, and in terms of procurement and design and build. There is no average surgery, as we know.
Yeah, and
But
I think that's really important as well, Shiraz, that people and dentists, when they ask the question and they say, what are these estimated costs? We're not pulling figures out of thin air.
no,
When we say that the range can be from 100,000 to 500,000, that's because within that bracket, that's where your project will sit. And it's not because we're charging, a lot for this or a lot for that. It's because, it's an industry standard,
yeah,
um, costing, really. So
yeah,
when you say, we want a three surgery practice, with a really nice reception, big decontamination room, massive staff room, etc. We can eyeball what that would be from a base build perspective. And I use the term base build a lot, because I think it gives an understanding of this is a no frills build. If we start adding on, we want brushed gold sockets on all of the plugs and light switches, and it seems silly to, oh, how much could that add? It might add an extra £3,000-4,000 to your end cost. And there are all of these little additions that, if we say they're not included in the base build, but then we can add those on as optionals at a later date, that then gives you the chance to pick and choose what you want. So
Yeah.
it's and also where you see value.
It's a key point actually you bring up here, in because there are a couple of processes in terms of the design and build process by who you use and how you go about doing it. So you can go very much down, as you know, down the architectural route. So you could appoint an architect once you found a building, and the architect would basically do a lot of what we're discussing here. But typically, architects' costs are based on the value of the build. So if you've got a really large space, but it may just be cost effective space, but they're going to charge you how much it costs to fit out completely. And this is where the kind of personality, I think personally, and we work with lots of architects, etc., and there's some really grand projects that we get involved in. But when you've got a 2,500, 3,000 square foot site, that's a big site. It's going to cost a lot to build, and obviously the architect, and justifiably so, they're doing everything for you. We tend to work down the architectural designer route, which isn't an architect, but I think as a turnkey solution, and I know you guys do this as well, is that when you can sit down with a client, really specify everything from your gold plated, gold brushed sockets to or using just white sockets, for example, or using basic vinyl flooring to Amtico flooring. We can really specify to a budget and to a specification and come in on that required budget. As you say, there isn't pretty much an industry standard in both areas in terms of design and build and equipment procurement, what an average practice will cost or an average surgery cost, and that's across the board. Same with bricks and mortar build and brand new builds. There is a very much an average out there in the industry that you can rely on. And obviously, based on the last 10, 15, 20 projects that we've done, we can give you a very quick ballpark, which will then you're going to need to go to the bank and speak to in terms of how much a loan you need or a finance company. So
on that average build, though, what I would say is, yes, there is an average build, but that when you've got an average build, and then we say, right, well, we get more specific, when we start deciding exactly what equipment you want to use, or how you want the reception to look, and the waiting room furniture. There is, and I experience it on a daily basis, that as we're an independent company. We work primarily we're customer centric based. We will talk to you for hours on the phone to get to your final decision, to your final vision. And as I said, with regards to that, creating that final spec, that is something that becomes then unique with you and your supplier. Because once you've had a conversation, once you've spoken to that supplier for a certain amount of time, once you've conveyed what your goals are, your interests, you do build an understanding and a rapport with that supplier. And I've worked with a lot of people and a lot of different dentists. Some dentists and some projects are, I want a Belmont Voyager. Can you install it next week? Fair enough. And that is, again, there's limited interaction. But when we're dealing with a squat practice, more than anything, it's about, you said in the first instance, if you like someone, you'll listen to them. If you trust someone, you'll buy from them. And I think that is what we emphasize so much, is that we hope you like us, but we want you to absolutely trust us 100%, because that's our business. We're not here for a few minutes. We need you to trust us, because there are decisions that we're going to have to advise you on. And in the same way, I would not tell you how to put a filling in my tooth or to give me a crown prep. We need you to understand that when we give you advice, that is exactly what we're doing. We're giving you expert advice,
Yeah.
in the
Right.
setting of practice.
Now, I mean, the whole philosophy, and I've worked on it for years, is people buy from people. So it's finding that healthy relationship and a partnership with a supply chain company, and also someone that understands what you want to achieve, and really be able to portray that in the design and the build and the equipment solution that we're providing moving forward. I mean, there are so many companies in the market. Very much, there's a lot that are very much catalog based, and it's literally, this is what we supply, and it's a tick box. But when we get into this kind of entity, a level of business where we are creating your shop front for you to work in for a number of years moving forward, really finding the right partner, and looking around to help develop that key relationship and that key brand, that it does take time, but obviously I think there's the key areas that you need to consider when you're speaking to these companies to help make sure that they deliver your kind of plan. um,
Yeah. Well, in exactly the same ways, we want you to trust us. Of course we do. We'd love to do the project. But at the same time, if we do something, if we've said something where we've shaken that trust, and there's no longer that, that good feeling between us, then we wouldn't be the right company for you. You'd be questioning every single decision we make. And so it is then not about price, because we might be cheapest. We might come in and say, well, listen, we're the cheapest one. But if you don't trust us, then that negates all cost factors completely, because you want to buy from someone you trust. And that, whether that might be, someone else being a catalog company, and, have they got your best interests at heart? Are they, selling you a product, and will they come back and fix it if it doesn't work out straight away? You've got to understand that happens across the board in every single project. In fact, I can't think of probably more than as many fingers as I have that projects have gone 100% correctly. There will always be issues. There will always be hurdles to overcome. And as I said, if you haven't got the trust in that person that they're going to be able to deliver on those hurdles, then that wouldn't be the right company for you. So it's just, you've just got to, it might be, but you'd be dealing with the stress. Like I've seen people stressed out from that the issues with the project and not getting resolved. And then we've come in and we've assisted at the end. But I think that is a huge takeaway, actually, to understand that even if we are the cheapest, if you don't trust us, we're not the right one.
No, 100%. And the same goes from the design and build perspective. I think the key thing area in making sure that we achieve success especially on the build side, and we're very much a project managed solutions provider, as you guys are as well from the equipment perspective. But I think project management is very key. A lot of dentists potentially will look to save money by going to a generalized builder, and to be fair, they'll get the job done. But what it does mean is that the project management and understanding from the builder's perspective on the dental side is definitely going to be quite limited, so can lengthen the process. And it also means, especially from your perspective, is your involvement as an equipment supplier, your involvement managing the builder for them to understand obviously increases heavily. And to be fair, it can be quite difficult. And I've seen it strain it a couple of times. So we very much are a project managed specialist in the dental arena. So communication is always through the project manager. Communication between all the suppliers and the merchants involved in terms of the build is all managed by the project manager. They understand dentistry, so there's no having to educate them on why do we need piping a certain way, why do we need lead lining, where to source it from. That all equates to a streamlined process, and also equates to you being fully compliant at the end of the actual build as well. So that's a key area. Definitely can use any builder you want, but I think with some of the specialists and healthcare specialists out there like us, you get a full project managed solution, and hopefully, fully, definitely
Yeah.
compliant product at the end of it. But just a thought, Chris. I mean, when it comes to equipment decision making,
Yeah.
obviously you supply a whole array of products, etc. But what do they need to be considered? What dentists need to be considering, kind of moving forward, future proofing, for example? When they're, you're selling a dental chair, a suction pump, an X-ray, but
Yeah.
where the way dentistry is going, is there any key considerations that they should be thinking about when they're actually making those decisions and buying equipment?
Definitely, and I think there's so when you're buying equipment, it's not, you're not paying for a brand so much as you're paying for the quality that comes from that brand. This isn't Prada or Louis Vuitton overcharging for a product, but it is more about that stability of that product. So if we take, for example, let's take the latest the trade show that I attended, and I walked around and I saw there were a few, let's say, not quite so popular brands from the UK that were advertising. There was Stone Weber, and again, it's great. It's a good piece of equipment. It's a nice chair. Is it something that I would choose? No, um, and that's not because I don't like the look of it or I don't think it's functional. I just know that it doesn't have the same level of support in the UK that someone like Belmont does. So I would always say, do you know what? If I'm going to buy something, there'll be a phenomenal chart. Like if we compare, and often in the dental industry, you'll see people comparing chairs to the car industry. So if we look at that and we see a great Chinese made car that has all the bells and whistles that a Volkswagen has, and it costs a third of the price. Um, and it might be good for a couple of years, but the second something goes wrong with it, where do you send it? Where do you go to? Who's
Yeah,
your who's
support,
your where?
parts
What's your recourse?
availability. Yeah, 100%.
And it's then one of the factors to consider, so importantly, and I think especially when choosing equipment, is calculate your downtime preemptively. So if you buy a chair package and you know that chair package is well serviced and it has a good foothold in the UK. So yeah, the two front runners are ADEC and Belmont. Um, if you say, right, I'm buying a Belmont, it's going to have 3 breakdowns a year. Let's call it an average. It's got 3 breakdowns a year. We're not saying that that's bad quality from Belmont. That would just be, it's potential to have 3 breakdowns a year. Something might go wrong. A valve might not work. It all has moving parts. So if it has those 3 breakdowns a year, how quickly can you get that fixed? So if we look at that Belmont chair as being, I would say 90% of the engineers in the UK can fix Belmont. They have Belmont's parts accounts, and they can come in and they can probably be with you the same day or next day. Usually we can come out the same day and assist with any breakdowns in the local vicinity to our HQ. So you know that when you're buying a Belmont, that downtime turns into half a day. So 3 times half a day is 1.5 days. Now, if you buy um, let's say Stone Weber, if you buy a Stone Weber chair, and you know that your nearest dealer for that Stone Weber chair is 70 miles away, and they've got 4 engineers. So that, let's give it the same breakdown 3 times a year, but the parts are not located in the UK. You have 4 engineers that are servicing a 180-mile radius. So their call out time, they may well be able to get out to you the first time on day one, but maybe the second time, well, it's going to take them 3 or 4 days to get out to you. And maybe the third time, that part isn't in stock in the UK and we have to order it directly from Italy. So that's going to be a couple of weeks. Now, from the Belmont, where we've said that we're going to have downtime of 1.5 days for the stern Weber, and I know I've just invented a hypothesis that works out in what I've said and makes me sound correct. However, it's not unrealistic to think that that could potentially happen. And so you're looking at then possibly a 2 week downtime period just by going for a chair that's not as well equipped or well serviced as a Belmont or an ADEC.
Yeah, it's I mean it's a quagmire of choices and decisions that got to be made in terms of equipment procurement. But what about future proofing? What do dentists need to be considering to kind of future proof the choices that they're making in terms of practice design and equipment solutions? What should they? I mean, obviously, digital dentistry is a definite,
Yeah.
definite requirement. But what else should they be considering moving forward when
So
developing
I would
practice?
so developing the practice, I would say it would be more about the planning work and the preparation work rather than the chair that you've bought. So it would be, what I call it, the top six when you're looking at the services for a chair package. What do you put into the services for a chair package? You put power, air, water, switching cable, suction pump, future proof. That's six. There we go. And the future proof line is basically a conduit that you can run anything, but it hasn't become 100% popular to run an HDMI cable, for example. That would be something I would say, yeah, run an HDMI cable, run an Ethernet cable to the chair, because now all the suction pumps and all compressors that are being sold, they can be connected into connected into the system, and an engineer can remote dial in to a suction pump or a compressor, diagnose the issue before they come out. And that saves you time. That saves you a second call out visit if it's something that they couldn't diagnose and fix on the
Yep.
day. So I think that would be a good future proof line to put within or inside the services for the chairs. Likewise with the X-ray services, again, the same thing. I think anything that can be connected up to the internet, to the web, then that has the potential to be diagnosed from a distance. When you're looking at more of a practical future proofing, so what can you start doing from the, let's say, from the day one of opening your practice? I think you're going to be working with the latest and the most modern technology. I think it goes without saying that future proofing in the sense of what's going to be coming out is as far as technology is concerned is important, but also looking after what you currently have. So yes, I would say making sure that you've got a very, very strict maintenance schedule set in your practice, to make sure that the equipment that you're spending potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds on does last the distance. So, you're buying a dental chair today, it should be lasting you, for the next 15 to 20 years. While as, if you don't have a cleaning or a maintenance schedule or a service plan in place, then, you can cut that in half.
Oh yeah. But also, I think practical planning as well. Obviously, as we talked about, multiple surgeries from day one. Obviously, what we typically see is a 3-4 surgery design and build, and dentists typically will fit out 1 or 2 surgeries initially, but then prepping for the third and fourth later on to get all the services in place, to help expansion for sure. So
Yeah.
get all the services in place, design it all in now. So when you're ready and the ROI is there, you can literally just plonk your equipment in straight away and start expanding the business to cover the shortfall when by not having enough dentists. So
Yeah,
definitely,
you gave that one to me on a plate, and I didn't take it. That was
no, 100%. I think
yeah, no, but
it's
absolutely, I agree.
two factor, isn't
It
it? It's
is,
two
yeah,
phases. it's understanding what you're
Yeah.
prepping for as a business in terms of the whole practice design, but also
Yeah.
what you practically got to allow for moving forward in terms of equipment. It's difficult, obviously. We haven't got a crystal ball for everything, but
No, no.
digital dentistry is a major player moving forward. AI is now getting involved within the
Yeah.
dental sphere in terms of designing crowns and bridges, etc. We've even got AI involved heavily now in developing and designing practices. Doing the
Yeah.
complete CAD design. So.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, it's again working with the right partners to help you think about this moving forward and plan for the future. Because ultimately, if we don't plan for the third and fourth surgery, it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run. Not just in terms of putting services in, but the hassle factor of a builder coming in to having to retrofit stuff
Yeah.
moving forward. And this is the kind of things that, as dedicated healthcare kind of suppliers, these are the kind of things that we're thinking of, for you moving forward.
Yeah.
It is a complex process, and obviously we've got to cover all the compliance arenas in terms of design and build as well as equipment supply. Um,
Well,
so
so I mean, with the podcast series, and I think we were saying before as well, just before we started, it can get quite quickly very passionate. Let's call it passionate. You can be quite passionate about how you feel about something, because we genuinely want to do the best possible for people when they come to us, and there is no reason that we would push back if there wasn't a reason to push back. And I
yeah,
think that what sometimes when we say, actually, that might not be the best route for you, we're not saying it out of a choice, we're saying it out of experience. And I think from this podcast series, I want to emphasize so much that there is support there, that this is what it's for. Fundamentally, it is to support your progress and your development with your own practice. And instead of sitting down with 10, 15 different suppliers and saying, oh, how much can you do, and oh, how much can you do, and oh, how much can you do, and then going back and putting it all in a spreadsheet, and then just picking the one that you think is the most financially viable from a bottom line perspective. There are so many other factors to consider. And I think that the effort that Shiraz and I are putting in even now, just to make sure that if you decide to go with someone else from a build, from a equipment selection, we're hoping that at least you're going to take away a few pearls
yeah,
from the
they've got to
series.
be held to the same standards that we're trying to portray here,
Exactly.
and that will hopefully come out in the podcast, which kind of leads us to kind of summing up really a little bit here, because we're hitting an hour now, but I think the podcast is really going to as I said, bring together all the kind of specialists within the supply chain industry from an equipment perspective, from a compliance perspective, finance, etc. We'll talk about the challenges that are involved in creating a dental practice from scratch, and the challenges of all those elements. How the supply chain for dental practices and dental practice projects differs from other sectors a little bit. What roles the equipment suppliers, the contractors, the designers, and all those other companies play in the success of a project like this. We'll also maybe talk about the common misconceptions and the pitfalls of setting up a practice. That does happen. Chris alluded to it earlier. And it's never
Yeah.
100%, but it's a question of, with a good company who have probably experienced those misdemeanors along the way, is how you kind of get around it and sort those solutions, and also talk to you about or explain to you about where there is often costs are underestimated. As you say, there is a huge area of pricing that we need to look at, but obviously it's very dependent on your style and your finishes, and also what you're comparing against.
It might be an idea to run through a few scenarios on that fact. I mean, again, we don't have to go into specifics of where and when and who and what happened, but I think if we take a cross section of some of the projects that we've done, and then highlight, right, this was how it was. This is how it could have been, and this is why it was this much. I think that's a very there's a link to this, which is when when you walk into Tesco and you pick up a sandwich, a chocolate bar, and a drink, and you go up to the till, there's an automatic meal deal discount for you. Um, when you pick up the wrong drink, that discount isn't provided, and the majority of the time, the person behind that checkout will tell you, "Oh, if you swap out this drink and choose that one, um, you'll get the meal deal discount." And I think that's where what we're trying to say at the moment is we want to be able to give you that level of advice. You don't have to choose it. That drink might be something that you absolutely wanted and you don't mind spending the extra money on it. But if you swap out this and do that, that would save you a chunk of money there. So I think those are the tips and tricks really that you might be able to pick out of this, and I think hopefully come out the other side a little bit more knowledgeable, bit more educated. Obviously, you guys are far more educated than I will ever be, but hopefully in this sector, I might be able to assist somewhat.
Chris, thank you for your time today. It's been insightful. It's been good to kind of understand, the company a bit more and what you guys do. Hopefully, as I said, we'll be developing this podcast series moving forward, inviting other partners in to talk about the whole process of obviously practice acquisition, design, build, procurement, etc., and really looking at all the nuances moving forward and setting up a complete guide, really, to the supply chain for the dental market. So we look forward to you tuning in to the next podcast. Any tips, questions, anything that you want us to cover moving forward, please send us a contact and let us know if you'd like to talk about other specific salient subject matter, and we'll definitely accommodate. But we've got a huge array of suppliers and companies invited to join the podcast moving forward, and hopefully we can develop this Building Dentistry podcast for you moving forward. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks very much. Bye bye.